as we continue here. The NFC Championship will have the Detroit Lions traveling to San Francisco. The Lions last won a road playoff game, believe it or not, in San Francisco. And I believe it was over 50 years ago. I think I heard it was 61 years ago, but I might be wrong about that. Quick stat for this game. The Lions went 4-4 this season when Jared Goff threw at least one pick. So turnovers are going to play a key factor. 4-4 when Goff throws a pick, but 10-1 when they didn't. As for the 49ers, they're very much the same. If Brock Purdy keeps it clean, they win. They have not lost a game with Brock Purdy. They are 11-0 this season when he does not turn the ball over. They are 2-4 when he does. So turnovers are always a key factor and the biggest stat for winning or losing games. But in this matchup in particular, it matters a lot. So whichever quarterback cannot make a mistake is probably going to win. Now, another key stat that I think is interesting, especially when you talk about the Lions have only played one game outdoors since October. Guys, think about that for a second. They have only played one game outside since October, and it was versus the Bears, which just so happens to be the worst game that Goff has played over the past 10 weeks. So the one game that was played outdoors, Jared Goff struggled the most. This game will be outdoors. Now, talking about the weather, Brock Purdy, I believed, had probably his worst game of the season last week, in my opinion. From really quarter one to quarter three, excluding the fourth quarter and that comeback where he looked like Joe Montana, according to David Lombardi. And maybe he did. But this game will not feature rain. It's going to be warm, sunny, no rain, nothing. Okay? And it's actually going to be quite nice. So both quarterbacks should benefit from nice weather, sunny weather in San Francisco. Now, on top of that, right, I think Brock Purdy is, like, objectively, and now we have learned this officially. I knew that he was bad against the Browns in the rain. We've seen him play in the elements. Brock Purdy, for me, is a future fade whenever he plays in the rain or possibly the snow moving forward. He is simply not the same player. He cannot control the ball. He cannot throw the ball the same way with the same accuracy. And that affects everything about him, especially because he's a younger player that plays through timing and anticipation. He just lacks a lot of confidence throwing the ball the way he wants to, which entirely impacts his mental game. So if, any games in the future are in the weather, just as Jared Goff has kind of been the same way, these guys are not weather quarterbacks. So the fact that it's in sunny weather, I think definitely really helps Brock Purdy, but also helps Jared Goff. Looking at injuries, the big one everyone's talking about is Deebo Samuel. We've had people say Stephen A. Smith has said that he would never pick the Niners without Deebo Samuel in this game. I do not think that Deebo Samuel is a make or break, play or not play, win or lose player in this game. That being said, he definitely would help. Now, if we watch Jawan Jennings, third and Jawan, I think he's a pretty good player. So Jawan Jennings actually played really well last week. If he's having to replace Deebo Samuel, at least it helps that we'll know he's not playing before the game, and that will help Kyle Shanahan prepare the game plan beforehand as opposed to during the middle of the game having to adjust all his plays and having a heavily featured weapon not playing anymore and having to kind of figure that out on the fly. It definitely helps Brock Purdy, Kyle Shanahan, the entire offense, understanding whether he's going to play or not play before the game actually begins. Now, for the Detroit Lions, they have a couple significant injuries. Jonah Jackson is going to be out of this game. Jonah Jackson is a really good guard. He's not an all-pro, but he's a Pro Bowl caliber guard. He is out. Now, this is big because the replacement is actually, unlike for Joe Thuney and Allegretti. The replacement is a significant downgrade. I don't know how to pronounce the guy's name. Awasika? I don't know. He had 7 pressures allowed on 28 snaps last week, according to Pro Football Focus. So that is a huge loss for Detroit, if that's the case. And that would definitely allow Armstead, Kinlaw, and Hargrave a much greater matchup. On top of that, Frank Ragnow is also beat up. Now, he is going to play. He is tough as nails. He's one of the toughest football players in the entire NFL. But he is not 100%. So that's something to keep in mind for both the run and the pass game of the Lions up front, because their greatest strength is their offensive line. Deebo Samuel, I agree with you. Lenny, he says Deebo is playing. He's probably going to play. He might not be 100%. He might not be able to take as many handoffs or hits, but I do expect him to play. Guys, if you haven't already, Gronk spike the like button, please. Those are the injuries. Let's get to Detroit's offense versus San Francisco's defense, which quite honestly might determine the game. So this is the side of the ball where I think it features the most questions and Detroit's opportunity to win the game or lose the game potentially. Last week, the Niners played the second best offense in the NFL, according to EPA, since week 10. That was the Green Bay Packers. A lot of people don't think that the Packers have as good of an offense as Detroit. A lot of people don't think the Packers have an elite offense, but that's actually the case. They've been the second best offense in the NFL since week 10. San Francisco's has actually been the best all year and since week 10 as well. Detroit ranks 5th, so it's another big challenge for the Niners defense, but just keep in mind that the Green Bay Packers offense was legitimately elite. And actually, if the Niners end up making the Super Bowl, the offense of the Detroit Lions and the Packers would be better than either the Chiefs or the Ravens. So the Niners would have already faced 2 better offenses than they would face in the Super Bowl. The key to this game for the Lions. The Niners are 3-4 this year in games when they surrender at least 100 yards rushing, and 2 of those 3 wins came against the Cardinals. So I don't even know if those really count. On top of that, the other win came in the divisional round against the Packers. So at least if you're a Niners fan, you can say, oh, the Packers lost and they had over 100 yards. So at least the Niners were able to overcome that. Now, that's one of the points I want to discuss here real quick with the Packers game is last week, things went about as bad for the Niners as they possibly could go, right? They played in rain. Purdy sucks in the rain. On top of that, there was I could probably count 5 or 6 when reviewing the game, third downs or red zone opportunities where Niner defenders just fell over and the Packers were wide open and they scored a touchdown or they got a first down. So the rain was heavily impactful, especially for the 49ers for whatever reason. They allowed 100 yards rushing, which is something that they typically lose when that happens, and they still won. They had a blocked field goal. They still won. Deebo got hurt. They still won. So all those factors you say wow, how did this team not lose? And how did they survive? Which a lot of Lions fans should say in the reverse, if that happens again, we can win this game. Now, you're not going to get rain, but hey, if the Niners, if they continue to play that poorly, the Lions should have the belief that they're better than the Packers, although the Packers beat them, pretty recently. But the Lions were the better team overall. The Lions can come in here and give a great fight and win and upset the Niners. The way to do it is running the ball, running for 100-plus yards. Green Bay was able to run the ball pretty effectively against the Niners. They had Aaron Jones go over 100 yards the first time in over 50 games against the San Francisco 49ers that one singular tailback, one singular halfback has gone over 100 yards. Now, to put that under context, Aaron Jones did have 18 carries for over 100 yards, but one carry went for 53 yards, which was the long carry where Logan Ryan missed a tackle. It would have been about a 15-yard carry. And Aaron Jones was extremely effective after contact in that game. If you watch that game, especially early on, Aaron Jones was just making things happen by himself. It wasn't as much the run blocking. There were some concepts like the toss sweep play that the Packers love to run, the outside zone runs that were effective. And this is the biggest advantage the Lions hold in the run game over the Niners is the outside zone running scheme. This is what leads me to believe that Jahmyr Gibbs should be the featured running back in this game for the Lions and not David Montgomery. The Niners are really good against inside runs, but they struggle a bit to set the edge and to defend the outside tosses, stretch runs, outside zone, that type of thing. So utilizing Jahmyr Gibbs' slashing ability to get outside and make people miss and get yards after contact would be the way to go. But again, going back to Aaron Jones, he had 1 carry for 53 yards, and on 17 carries for the rest of the day, he had 3.2 yards per attempt. So not exactly the best day overall, but when you look at the stats, you say, wow, 6 yards a carry for Aaron Jones, that's sick. So just keep that in mind. He was mostly held in check, but he did have 1 explosive run, which is a game-changing play. If Gibbs is able to hit a couple of those throughout the day, that could give you a big difference maker. Gibbs and Jones are also modeled to be a similar player. Electric, fast, explosive, kind of slimmer backs, but they're able to make quick cuts and explode. David Montgomery is very plodding. He's very kind of slow but powerful. That's not the type of running back that has success against the 49ers typically. Now, other areas of weakness that the Lions could take advantage of, Avery Thomas. He's just the perimeter corner on one of the sides. He had a terrible game against the Packers. He took multiple pass interference calls that set up the Packers with good success in the red zone and opportunities to score. Now, one of the questions here is, can the Lions rely on players that they don't typically rely on? If they're going to target Thomas, I wouldn't expect him to line up across from, Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I would not expect, Thomas to draw that assignment. That's going to be Ward. That's going to be Lenore in the nickel position, both good cornerbacks. That's not going to be Thomas. So you're going to have to target outside the numbers. You're going to have to target Jameson Williams, Josh Reynolds. Those players are going to have some nice plays in this game. Can Jameson maybe burn Thomas with the speed down the field for one big play, a game-changing play, a game-changing pass interference? That is going to be something to look out for the Lions to attack. But I honestly believe that the area where Goff is most effective, and everyone knows this, is the middle of the field. The middle of the field where the linebackers are, the safeties are, the nickel corner is. Because of the play action game and because of how they set up everything off of their running game, that is where the Niners are their best as well, which is where I think that the Goff success might be hindered a bit. I don't think that Goff is going to find as much success against this Niners defense on the road, outdoors, that he did against the Rams or against the Bucs indoors, because the Niners have a much better pass defense. The Niners have a much better 4-man rush, and the Niners have a much better coverage linebacking unit. So I think Goff is going to struggle. They also have a really good nickel corner. Lenore is a really good nickel corner, and Charvarius Ward is a good perimeter corner. So it's really going to be the running game and targeting Thomas. That is going to be the way for the Lions to move the ball. I don't expect Sam Laporta to really be able to have a huge game because Fred Warner is one of the best, if not the best, coverage linebacker in football, and that's a tough matchup. And I don't expect St. Brown to go off just because of that's where the Niners are going to flood the field with zone coverage, is the middle of the field. And Lenore is a good nickel corner. But the key for the Niners is the ability to slow down the running game enough to set up situations where they can let their front four tee off. And this is the splits when Jared Goff is under pressure or he is clean. This is the key to the game for the 49ers. Jared Goff, when he is clean, 4th in completion percentage, 9th in yards per attempt, 2nd in EPA per play, 25 touchdowns, 4th in the NFL. He is an elite quarterback when he is kept clean, when he has protection, when he's able to go through his progressions, when he's able to be accurate with timing to throw, he will make plays. This happens regularly because the Lions have an excellent offensive line, and they often can run the ball, which sets up play action, And teams are usually not as well equipped to defend the middle of the field as the 49ers are. When under pressure, though, Jared Goff is a little bit worse. And the Niners know this because they're familiar with Jared Goff, having played him many times with the Rams. And the last 5 games that Jared Goff has played the Niners, he's actually 0-5. Under pressure, 14th in completion percentage, 50%. 6.3 yards per attempt is 13th. EPA per play is 18th. And he only has 6 touchdowns on the season when under pressure, 14th in the NFL. Now, the Niners have been one of the best pressure teams in football. They actually, believe it or not, had 40% pressure rate against the Packers. It didn't really look like it, but that was the case. 40% pressure rate. Jordan Love is much better against pressure because of his ability to escape, and his ability to throw off platform is one of the best already in the NFL, which is an area that I don't think enough people give the Packers credit. They were able to withstand pressure from the Niners and still make some plays down the field. That in mind, the Packers still did throw 2 interceptions, had less than 200 yards, and only scored 21 points when comparing them to what they were, which was the second best offense in the NFL. The Niners with Chase Young have also generated on average 40% pressure in the 10 games with Chase Young. So they've been an elite pressure unit with Chase Young. And this is all lead me to believe that the Lions will have some success when they're able to run the ball. But I think it's going to be a little inconsistent because I think that the Niners know that the way for the Lions to run the ball is outside. And I think that the Niners will know how to defend Jared Goff because they've played him so often. I also think that the Lions' offensive line having injuries is going to cause them issues on passing situations with Eric Armstead, Javon Kinlaw, and Javon Hargrave. So I think that I lean towards the Niners holding the Lions in check. I'm not going to say the Lions are going to not score, their points, but I definitely feel like this is one of the toughest matchups the Lions have faced on defense all year. And this is uniquely a tough matchup for the Lions because the Niners are good in the middle of the field. They've got a really good 4-man rush. They don't have to blitz the Lions. And I think they've got enough personnel to cover the Lions. So I think the Lions, I project them somewhere around 17 to 24 points, somewhere in that range. That's kind of how I feel about the Lions. I could see, if they're really able to run the ball, that could lead, for an upper echelon game from the Lions where they're able to set everything up. But I don't really see that as the case. I think they might hit a couple explosive runs, but I don't think it's going to be super consistent. I also think that legitimately the drop back passing game of the Lions might struggle a little bit. That's at least what I think. Now, switching to the other side of the football, we've got the Niners offense taking on the Detroit defense. The way that I see Kyle Shanahan approaching this is seeing how his disciples have approached this defense and going from there. So we've seen Canales of the Bucs and McVay, both from the school of Shanahan in some way, shape, or form. Both heavily lean on the passing game, and both had 350-ish yards through the air with their quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield and Matthew Stafford. The Lions have given up 345-plus passing yards in 5 straight games, including twice to Nick Mullins, who played for Kyle Shanahan at one point. So my idea is that Kyle will spread and shred. I think there's going to be a lot of attempts for Brock Purdy and a lot of passes for Brock Purdy. And I think this game will be on Brock Purdy to win. And there is a little bit of inherent risk that Brock Purdy will throw the ball to the other team. But I think that is the Niners' approach in this game, is they're going to throw the ball more than they run it. And they're going to lean into the empty formations. They're going to lean into, throwing the ball and having, some explosive passing plays in the intermediate levels of the field. I especially think that they're going to have success with some of the matchups that they have in this game. Brandon Ayuk with Cam Sutton is clearly a Brandon Ayuk favorable matchup. Whoever is playing Vildor is a favorable matchup. The only real matchup that's sort of even to me is like Branch versus Debo. That's pretty even. But I feel like McCaffrey against the Lions linebackers is a pretty big advantage. I feel like Kittle versus the linebackers is a big advantage for the Niners. And I also feel like, maybe even Kittle against somebody like CJ Gardner-Johnson is a pretty big advantage given the size discrepancy. So I think the Niners have a lot of matchups in the passing game here. We've seen consistently teams be able to throw on the Lions. And the Lions have actually been outgained in both of the playoff games. So they've actually been outgained by their opponent. And really where the Lions have been great has been in the red zone. Their ability to stifle teams in the red zone and keep the points low, while their offense has, at home, been able to feast on defenses in the red zone. And that's been the difference between, the teams. I think where the Lions have to have success is Aiden Hutchinson against Colton McKivitz on the edge, and also by pressuring Purdy in the interior. In my opinion, when I've seen Purdy struggle the most, it's with a mucky picture in the middle of the field, putting a lot of zone defenders where he wants to throw the ball and trying to get to the middle of the pocket and forcing him to throw a little bit off balance. So I think Purdy and Shanahan are going to understand this and get the ball out to Ayuk pretty often early in the game. And, out to the sidelines pretty often and featuring that Sutton versus Ayuk matchup, just as Evans versus Sutton was very favorable for the Bucs in that game. Purdy's numbers against the blitz this year have been all first in every category. So if the Lions do decide to blitz, which they're pretty, known to do, I think they're top 10 in blitz rate. Purdy is first in yards per attempt, touchdowns, big time throw percentage, and passer rating against the blitz. And it mostly has to do with the fact that he's got one-on-one matchups everywhere. So that is a really hard thing to do to the Niners, is blitz, because Purdy gets it out fast with anticipation. He knows where to go with the ball. They have answers, and they have really good yards after catch players, which is where the Lions defense is also a bit susceptible. 9th against the most yards after catch allowed, and the 5th most missed tackles in the NFL. One area where I think the Lions have a chance to defend the Niners is the run game. The run game has not been as good for the Lions in the playoffs. They've actually allowed 4.7 yards per carry to 3 different running backs in the playoffs. But they have been a good run defense overall for the entire season, and they are a top 5 run defense in the NFL. The Niners are the most effective and efficient running game in the NFL. And I do think that this is an area where the Niners could maybe have more success than people think, but I also would not really lean on it if I was Kyle. I'd try to be a pass-heavy script, just because if you're trying to run the ball a lot on the Lions, they've shown that they can really defend it well. Now, if they're trying to overplay the pass, then that's where you can run it on them. But actually, 2 of the bigger advantages this weekend, according to next-gen stats, is outside zone and inside zone being ran by the Niners against the Lions this week. So those are the run concepts that the Lions struggle with more than power running concepts. So something to keep in mind, which is maybe why the Bucs and the Rams specifically had more success against the Lions than other teams, because they are zone running teams as well. So that also could be something to keep in mind. But the final factor for me is really like the ultimate questions of the game is which backbreaking area of the game will be a bigger weakness, the Lions pass defense or the Niners run defense. Personally, I think it will be the Lions pass defense. Were the Niners, rusty the first game? What is Purdy declining? Is he regressing, or was that just the rain last week? Because if he looks the same as he did this week and he plays the same as he did this week, then this handicap's completely wrong, because I don't think he's that player. I think that was heavily influenced by the conditions. Both red zone defenses have been strong. I expect both to maintain strength, but I will say the Niners have been the best red zone offense in the NFL. And the last kind of factor will be Dan Campbell's aggressiveness versus Kyle Shanahan's game management, where a lot of people have been critical of Shanahan for being too conservative and Campbell for being super aggressive and oftentimes very good, but at other times maybe too aggressive. So that's where the margins could be had, where the Lions could maybe make up a possession or two with the aggressive fake punt going for it on 4th down, where the Niners might decide to punt or, might decide to settle for a field goal, while the Lions might not. On top of that, the Lions might go for it on 4th and 1, and just like the Niners stopped the Packers, they might stop the Lions, which could unfold into a blowout for the Niners. The ref stats for this game, Clete Blakeman will be the ref. He did ref the Niner Kansas City game, I think, in the Super Bowl, if I'm not mistaken. Niners fans, correct me on that. But since 2019, the Niners are 4-0 with this ref. The Lions are 1-5. Both teams have, Niners have been very good this year. Niners have been very good since 2019. Lions have not. So don't take too much of that into the game, but just saying the Niners have never lost with this ref since 2019. All right. Well, now determining who's going to win the game. I think the Niners should win this game, and I'm going to lean towards the Niners covering. I don't think it would be like a huge bet or anything with the Niners laying 7 at 6.5 maybe, but the Niners in good conditions, I think, will be able to throw the ball as much as they want to. I think Brock Purdy is going to have a great game. I think that he'll put up 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. I think the Niners will be able to run the ball a little bit better than people think they will. And I think defensively, they might give up some running plays, but I think when they're able to create a no-gain situation and force Goff under pressure with their 4-man rush, I think they'll be able to get a few stops. So I see this as like a 34-21 type of game where the Niners always have control. They gain control early, but the Lions are like not really out of it necessarily, but they're just not necessarily like viable to win in the 4th quarter. So that's kind of the way I see the game going. I think this will be a much cleaner and better game for the San Francisco 49ers than we saw against the Packers. I think that was their bad game. That was their down game. That was their rust game. I think the Lions have been a little fortunate, not trying to take anything away from the Lions this playoff run, but I think they have been a little fortunate in terms of being outgained and all that stuff in the first couple matchups and it not coming to bite them. This is certainly one where I think it will come to bite them. Now willing to take any questions about these matchups, guys. Thank you so much for watching this live. If you haven't already, Gronk spike the like button. Let me know your predictions.